Final question. How will these worlds play into part 3, aka what is the ultimate point here? And I'll let y'all go first on this one. Subtext.
Sure. I mean, it's
Good luck.
yeah, it's a meaty question. It's something that like indirectly is, I think, a kind of what my next video is about in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's also like the least like it could be anything. Like who knows is basically the answer to this one, but best guesses.
I mean, I think the weirdly enough, it is both extremely new but extremely true to the original in some ways. Because the Cloud has, in the original, probably the most memorable, impactful moment that we all know that developers keep talking about is the live stream sequence, right? Where Cloud needs to, you know, wrestle with what is real and the things that he believes of himself in the real world before he goes into the live stream sequence in his mind are very real. Like, he believes he is a soldier in the original just as much as he believes that he saved Aerith in Rebirth. You know, like, these are false beliefs that he has come to believe are incredibly real and have an impact on how he sort of interacts and moves through the world. And then in the World 1 maze, that sense of reality is shattered, right? And that, like, his belief system is called into question. And so I think because we are all coming into this, or a lot of, at least 50% of the player base is coming in with that base knowledge from the original game, the devs have sort of accounted for that by making a new thing his false reality. And that new thing being what he believes happened at the Forgotten Capital. So that, you know, that can then be shattered and we can learn the truth of it, and we can sort of it's a new version. It's basically like, rather than him just having a false belief about what happened in Nibelheim, he's literally having and we as players are having a false belief of what just happened at the end of Rebirth. And so it's sort of playing with that and having to sort of come to a belief system around, like, what is then real? What do I accept as the final sort of version of reality? And I think, and I feel like I'm not explaining it too well without sort of a lot of other context, but essentially, once he gives up his identity as a soldier, his self-belief that he was a soldier in the original, that then goes away. It's no longer real. And so I think when he has to come to terms with what actually happened to Aerith, that thing that seems to be real, just like he thought he was a soldier, the reality where Aerith sort of lives on will also have to be put to rest. And we will all have to move forward with reality as it is, right? Like, history, like, what does Aerith say at the Temple of the Ancients? She says, the past is set in stone, right? But the future, even if it's written, can be changed. And so the past, in this case, we are now past the Forgotten Capital. So what happened there happened. Like, it is now set in stone. Even if it temporarily lives on in some errant sort of worlds conceived by Cloud or by the live stream or by Aerith, whatever, it will eventually have to sort of like go off into the ether. And the rest of the game will then have to, I think, be about, so the end point of part 3 is, all right, that is the fate that will be changed. You know, like, we have all been concerned with, like, what fate is going to be changed. And a lot of us, for everyone, the most important fate to a lot of players has been the fate of Aerith. But it seems like that fate has been settled, and now in part 3, that'll be the sort of whatever changes at the very end of the entire story will be the fate that changes. I don't know if that made a lot of sense.
I mean,
but
just
it's
to
good
like
stuff.
really quickly jump on that is that literally the ads for the game were the world will be saved, but will you? And Aerith's line in Rebirth is, "This is to save the world and you." Aerith didn't end up being the "will you" part.
Oh, interesting.
So the end result is, will Cloud be saved? Because this is also double meaning is that the world, it does not need to be saved, because it just depends on what your concept of world is. So does that mean Sephiroth's world, or does that mean the life stream? So you have to kind of just, and this is why you pushed Aerith's death into the third game, which is not relevant to the actual question, but it is 100% to create the resolution. I remember saying this on NSP stream, and it is buried into my mind like 3 years ago, where I said, finally, the thing that is a part of Cloud's being after the original is all of this regret of Aerith, of Zack, and these characters now having this new presence in the game, and his perspective of these events and who these people are is changing because of the way that Remake is telling its story, for the reason that Cloud's perception of their involvement in his life will cure essentially what ailed him after Advent Children, which is that he only began to deal with the grief of their loss because he finally accepted who he was and what had happened, and that it's not his fault. But that didn't heal the actual damage. So the reason for the emphasis of, like, what could be in dreams, or could I have made a better decision in memories, is to essentially working through the grief. So that was the thing I said to NSP is that he can finally rest. He can finally let go of these things. We can let go as the player of, like, you know, all of this like sort of perceived pain of loss that has happened. And I just remember one comment being like, "What grief? That hasn't happened yet." And I'm just like, mother, this is just digs into me every time. So the whole point of this is just to further his development is the reason. The reason for all of this is to further Cloud's development as a character. And I think if I was just looking at it through that lens and through all of the characters, that is succeeding 100%. The third game, guaranteed people will be giving awards to the game simply because of the Cloud livestream resolution scene. There is not going to be a shadow of doubt that, because that scene is already super powerful, plus Aerith's death also being resolved at the same time, that is going to make everyone's eyes wet.
The question is, will livestream chapter 3, 5, 7, or 12 be the best livestream Cloud gameplay chapter? The interlude where you play as Cloud in his mind over and over and over.
Dude, if the final fight with Sephiroth in his mind, like after the Northern Crater, is just like the most smooth, buttery Cloud gameplay I've ever experienced in my life, and it's only in that sequence, wouldn't that be just hilarious? It's like,
maybe that's where Fusion Sword comes into play.
That would be pretty neat.
I want it to be like MGS4, the final battle.
Just punching,
you know, between Oslet and Snake. You know, just.
I mean,
yeah, sure.
Battle.
I mean, yes to all of that. Yeah.
Okay.
We got shirtless Sephiroth before. Now they'll both be shirtless.
They have to give that to us.
They have to. We deserve it.
We did already. I mean, as long as he has a bathing suit outfit, you know, you can make it happen.
Yeah, mods will make it happen.
Clark.
I mean, I don't have much to add other than that. This is what I've been saying since the beginning: is that the entire purpose of this is to service the true crux of the game, which is the live stream sequence. And how you really hammer that home is that you make all of the stuff equal it, right? And so I do think that the live stream sequence, the crux, now has the weight to resolve all of the open-ended elements of the compilation that are worth closing. It's got to close all of that stuff, and that includes this new end to Rebirth, where we've got Cloud in a different mental state. That needs to equal itself out, and I know that there's some pushback on making sure that that's a separate thing so that the live stream sequence is exactly the same. And I know that the motivation for a lot of that is very shipper related, but I don't think so. I think they took a big swing because they've always recognized that, like, even Hamaguchi himself recognized that for him, the scene that he was remembered most from Final Fantasy VII was Aerith's death, right? Well, I'm not saying that they failed in making a great game. They did. But if you ask most of the developers what the crux of the game is, and Hamaguchi was not one of them, they'll say it was the live stream sequence. So there is this opportunity for them to correct a misconveyance of the core themes of Final Fantasy VII to a new audience by by dedicating more of the meta plot to it. That said, though, what is the narrative purpose of the worlds? The narrative purpose is still, like, when you say ultimate, you mean like the end. The ultimate narrative purpose and the ultimate thematic purpose might be a little bit different. And I think from a mechanical standpoint, we really can get away from the fact that this is largely done to narratively create interest during a much longer development cycle to allow us to stay engaged with the story while they finish it. I think that is its purpose for the narrative is to keep it open-ended. And how it serves the themes, though, I think is something we all kind of agree on.
The one thing I'll add to that is because I agree, and I think most people agree on that. Like, got to keep the story going, right? Like, even the developers have said, like, got to keep you guys hooked for the next 3 years, and I think that's very true. But I do think it potentially diminishes the potential integrity of it, right? Like, if these guys aren't complete hacks and they're like, there is something to the way you tell a story, and it's a big part of my next video, so I won't get too deep into it, but like, in a story, you think things are heading a particular way, from beginning to end, and usually right in the middle, there is a interruption. There is like something happens that seems to be like the counter to where you think things are going. And so I think that has been essentially what's been happening throughout this remake trilogy. We end the first game, we think fate will change. Second game happens, fate doesn't change. So it's sort of a disruption of like that potential straightforward path. And then the third game will close it. The reason it feels such a challenge, though, is that they're spreading it out over like 10 years. And you're not experiencing one story from beginning to end. Because like, it's satisfying when you reach the end of a movie and the thing from the middle is overcome. But it's like, now we're just like sitting with the middle of the movie hanging for 3 years. And so it feels less satisfied. The momentum feels messed up. It feels, I don't know. That's just, there's more to it, but I think this is the simplest, I guess.
I have a chime in to the other aspect of what Clark was saying, which is that I've been thinking a lot about this subject to a point where I'm dabbling in writing a video about it. But I think just because it was brought up that it's worth going into is that I think what Clark said about the compilation and resolving those sort of tie-ins, I think one of the things that the compilation heavily leaned into was the concept of afterlife. as opposed to sort of the crux of the original game being very not, I don't want to say overshadowed, but definitely encompassed the idea of loss more so in a very visceral manner, and it would be foolish, I think, to try and capture that feeling quite in the same way again. I think we've all revisited that discussion before, but the compilation introduced the idea of consciousness merging and consciousness being ever present in us. But I think what the compilation failed to ultimately accomplish was to make that feel like something worth adding to the story. And I think that that was a lot of people's core complaint about a lot of what was added to Final Fantasy VII is should I care about these things? I think after experiencing the Tifa livestream sequence, I think it became super clear to me that the discussion and the reason for these apps, like these worlds and all this other stuff, is to really make you start to feel what it would be like in this world, to sort of experience not loss, but the idea that there is something greater than what there is in reality, is to start to really kind of like go through the idea of like the way that we see through Tifa's eyes what this visceral feeling of experiencing, you know, an afterlife would be like. Hearing like your mother and father calling you as you're kind of visiting these memories, and then literally at the end of this sequence, her being like re-put together by the weapon at the end. It's very tapping more into that, which I think is why they made the conscious decision to offset Aerith's death to the finality, to kind of full circle bring the ideas introduced in the compilation, the ideas of Final Fantasy VII that might not have landed as hard in that.
Yeah.
Oh,
You can keep going. You can keep going.
that's it. That was it. But I saw the hand go up. I couldn't resist.
No, the thing I would add to, because you talk about the viscerality of it, right? And like, it's hard to re-experience something for the second time, right? Like,
Yeah.
And so that is why they've thrown things into chaos in a way that's at times pretty unsatisfying. Like Josh, everything you talked about at the very beginning of this conversation, all those emotions you had about the ending were emotions that I had. Like, I was not very satisfied by the ending the first time I experienced it. But like looking at the full sort of scope of things, right? Like, acceptance is such a huge theme of Final Fantasy VII, right? Like, acceptance of who you are, acceptance of what has happened to you, and this carries through all the way to Advent Children, where like Cloud has to accept everything, right? Like, he has to fully accept like what happened and has to come to terms with it. And in terms of that viscerality, I think there is potentially something to the idea of creating the potential that maybe Aerith did live in this like dream reality, right? Like, maybe this other reality was created where she did live on. But we have to then let that go, just like Cloud will have to let that go. And we will have to viscerally accept that we couldn't save her. We had this conception that maybe we could save her because of what happened at the end of Remake.
Mm-hmm.
But then we come to Rebirth and we couldn't save her. And in part 3, we will have to accept that just as much as Cloud is going to have to accept it.
We're going to have to press X to let go.
No, you're going to have to hold L2 and R2 with highest adaptive resistance. One hand at a time.
Is it her head heavier than her body? Oh God, the adaptive controls.
But I also hope that it feels like we are like Cloud, and we
it
have
really
to make that as
feels like we're losing air.
Yeah, make that like a real choice though, right? Like, because if these dream realities are treated as real things, if you could take a white materia from Aerith's dream, make it, and Cloud could be holding it in the real reality, then the implication is that Aerith is just as real as that white materia. And maybe we could bring her back. Maybe we really could bring her back, but there will be a reason why we can't. and because bringing her back would mess things up too much, or I don't know exactly how.
Yeah,
like,
I'm afraid of it going in the sort of Life is Strange direction where it turns into it's always bad to mess with time and blah blah blah, because I feel like that's not really, I feel like it's tropey and it isn't. I mean, I love Life is Strange, but like right now I don't want that to be the big takeaway from FF7 is
because
time
that's
travel.
not a real lesson. You know, like that's not a real valid message. Like, oh, you don't screw with stuff. Like, okay, but like the planet is dying. Can we screw with stuff until the planet isn't dying, please? You know.
I do think that there's some truth to what you're saying, though, in the sense that it is about getting to that point narratively of us making the choice to let her go emotionally.
Right.
Because I'm just thinking that, like, here's what's going to happen. And I'm sorry to do that thing where it's like, this is how it's going to play out, but this is how it's going to play out. Is that we're going to be in that Tifa live stream sequence and we're going to start plugging in memories of, like, oh, that doesn't align. Maybe she wasn't there or something like that. And Cloud starts to realize that Aerith is actually going to be gone. And then what's going to happen is we are literally going to play the moment where in this game we walked up to Aerith and our friends disappeared. We're going to play the moment where they didn't disappear.
Slow walk.
All of the emotion of that scene is going to be playing through us because we're seeing the scene that we've seen 100 times in our heads, how this is going to go. But what's happening to Cloud is that it's dawning on him that this actually is happening, and he's got to he starts to like break down and open up emotionally. And we're going to see how Yuffie reacts to the death and how Barrett is like crying and like how Red is dealing with it. And this is all going to play up to us getting to her in the water and actually the emotional release of like letting her go. It will be he's let go of like this sort of fictitious part of this reality and is actually accepting her being gone and the scene concluding. So it will be that.
Do we think this is the climax of the live stream sequence this time? Because I think it would be very weird to have this in the live stream sequence and then climax the live stream sequence on just like, oh, I thought I was Zack. Like, I feel like the Zack thing has to happen first.
A swirl of black whispers is going to come over Aerith as she's falling into the pool and she's leaving us. And then it's like, and then Sephiroth's like, she's mine now. And then he like throws his Dracula cape over Aerith. And then he's like, no. And then that will be the conclusion.
Yeah, that sounds right.
I do think the biggest challenge that they do have, though.
I agree with you, Josh. Just to answer your question.
I do too.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Tifa will be right by your side the whole time.
Yeah.
Or something. I don't want to talk about that.
Whoever that is.
What if the playing through the stabbing and the slow walk and the burial, what if it's like dead silent for like the first half?
It's
like,
going to be.
No
We're
music
just going to be hearing everybody crying.
or anything.
The only thing you hear is the sound of your DualSense vibrating.
You're going to feel the water as you ease into the pool with Aerith's body.
I'll be so sad if there's no holding the body slow walking up the ramp. I need it.
It's gonna be there. I'm telling you, there's not a single way that
I forgot he doesn't walk up the ramp anymore because they probably bury her in the basement where it's ugly. Unless I have this batshit crazy theory that is probably not real at all, that like them burying down there is the dark Cloud memory of it, and that the brightly lit top part where they used to bury her in OG and Advent Children is where they actually buried her, but he's just remembering the like visually ugly, dark, shadowy version of it. I don't think that's actually true. I think for simplicity game design's sake, they just don't want you to have to walk up all the way or whatever, but it's still very weird that they would change the location of one of the most iconic scenes in gaming history to not have that light shining in and everything.
I hope they make it so that you can go down a very uninteresting elevator, just like in the Nibelheim manor.
Yes, that fixes everything.
The one thing I will add though is that I do think the biggest challenge that they have is like, how will they make that acceptance moment really hit? Because in the 3 years that we have, I think everyone has come to the conception, I've heard it in multiple podcasts, not just this one, where everyone is like, we are going to have to accept it, and Cloud is going to have to accept it. And the question is, like, we are all expecting to come to a point of acceptance. So how will they do it in a way that actually hits it, that actually hits us?
Right.
I think everything we just described hits it. I think L2R2, let Aerith go, slow walk, hopefully, fingers crossed, see the actual stabbing. I said that on Twitter once, and somebody quote tweeted me and then deleted their tweet a few minutes later, but it said, "I can't believe you want to see a woman savagely brutalized like that," or something. I was like, uh-oh.
You mean getting stabbed like in the original game?
Yeah.
You mean the way that it just happened?
Yeah.
Well, it's probably gonna happen again.
I agree with subtext. It is a barrier, and I don't know if what we've described is enough. Again, we're relying on this, argument from incredulity here, where we have to just hope that the creatives are creative. So, because there's a lot of pressure on the scene to deliver. There's a lot of pressure on all of this to deliver.
Yeah,
I think especially if you're because here's what they did is and this is why a lot of people are pissed off to begin with is that you delayed the thing that everybody wanted to see here. So now it has to count. Now it has to count double times the amount that you promised the original time.
Okay,
that it's going to count.
I have a thought on this. So there's the whole take, which is like, this was the moment for it. The moment has passed. I do not sympathize with that at all, because all of we who care about this, we have played through, seen that scene, know it's coming to the maximum amount. Like there was not going to be a surprise element of it, and the fact that we saw a shortly edited, chopped up backwards version of it now, I really don't think will take away from seeing the full one, because there's better graphics now. Like we've already seen the scene, we've already felt the emotions. Like I don't think what they did in Rebirth is going to take away from this for those of us who know this scene backwards and forwards.
I
essentially. Sorry.
I was just gonna say there is some good signs that this has already worked, at least for me, because after playing Rebirth and with the context of Rebirth's ending and going and watching Advent Children, I talk about this in the writing that I'm doing now, but I feel very little like seeing Aerith as a ghost in Advent Children, but it's one of my favorite lore bits, and that area is very interesting, and the context of the conversation is very interesting, and how Zack shows up and how it's linked to all these things. But during the watching of it, I felt nothing originally. Like it didn't emotionally impact me in a way. It's like maybe for others it was different, but because of my background with Final Fantasy VII at that point, it was very dull. I didn't feel the way that I think I should have felt. But watching that scene now in Advent Children, I have the context of how Aerith is sort of shown off at the end of Rebirth, where the context of her conversation in Temple of Ancients resonated very clearly with me, where it's like, even though they're dead, it doesn't make it any easier. And that entire final sequence in Rebirth really does feel like that. It's like, it doesn't even matter if she is around. It doesn't feel like she's around. Every aspect of that scene is just making it just feel like she's just gone extra than she was like when she wasn't around. And in Advent Children, it felt very similarly, the way that they shoot her, the way that you don't make eye contact with her. Like Cloud doesn't even face her until the very end of the game or the movie. And that actually did emotionally resonate with me with that. So I do think that Rebirth is working. It is laid the groundwork for these ideas to work and to resonate with people. So I think just because we haven't seen, and there's a lot of what ifs, part 3 isn't out, I think that part 2 has solidified the proper basis for a very good conclusion to the game. So
you know, when it comes to the thing of conclusion, I had pulled up something that, and I don't want to overdo it, but one of my favorite writings, there's a guy who's a screenwriter. He wrote like Aladdin and Pirates of the Caribbean and a couple other things, and he has a site from like the early 2000s or something. It's one of the ugliest sites you'll ever see, but it just has like a lot of columns that he wrote about writing, and one of my favorite ones is about endings, and he says a good ending must be decisive, set up, and inevitable, but nonetheless unexpected. And I'll save you from the rest of it, but like that, like it all has to add up, but it has to be unexpected is like the most difficult but truest kind of like thing. There is like, how do you still do it when we're all kind of expecting it? And that is the big question.
All right, so I haven't actually answered the final question yet, so I will do that, and then we can, if anyone has anything else to say real quick, or if chat has any super pressing questions to ask, but otherwise we'll ease it out. So my answer to the question of what are all these worlds leading towards is a couple things. So mostly I think it's further embellishing upon the themes that were already there in a way that makes the narrative compelling throughout a 3-part 8 to 10 year series. And I agree that it connects a lot to the live stream. So I really like the parallel that Cloud's sort of images in his head of being Zack and now of Aerith still being alive. These are his dreams of wishful thinking. These are his live stream worlds of optimism in a thematic way. And it's possible they may even tie that in. Like maybe the Nibelheim flashback we played through in Rebirth and in OG, maybe that is, maybe, or at least in Rebirth, maybe they're pitching that as a live stream world. Maybe that is one of these bubble worlds where it's like the real world, but the memory is sort of different. It's how you wished it could be, or it's how you fear it could be. And so the idea of that Cloud is going to have to let go of these dreams and embrace the real him thematically is going to somehow, maybe narratively, to tie in all of these optimistic dreams in a way that condenses the focus to the real world and embracing what you have and stuff. As far as furthering that to another plot development, which I think can be very compelling, I did not come up with this. Somebody commented on one of my YouTube videos with this, and I was like, oh my god, I think they figured it out. I love the idea that you have this empty white materia, and I haven't, done the cross-checking and trying to follow the A, B to Z, where is this materia coming from, are there two of them, blah, blah, blah. I just know there's an empty white materia, and materia is useless without knowledge/memories/dreams. So I think the one sentence answer to what is the point of these dream worlds, they are going to be the dreams of wishful thinking that power the white materia to defeat Sephiroth and Jenova for good. I'll be kind of surprised if that doesn't happen, considering they are showing us dreams of wishful thinking and an empty device that needs dreams to power it. I could totally be wrong, but I thought that was a very compelling idea. So the very end
of Remake literally has Aerith saying before you strike Sephiroth, everyone's wishes, let us fulfill them in Japanese.
Oh.
So just throwing that out there.
Yeah. I like it.
Yeah. I think we're in for a wild ride.
Did we get it?
Yeah, we solved it.
We can go to another game.
It was really good though to have like a real concentrated conversation around these questions. Like I think we unpacked a lot.
# Rebirth resolved.
Hey. Yeah.
Well, this has been extremely fun. Udrix asks, my question is, at the end of part 3, where do you want things to stand in relation to Advent Children? I personally want Advent Children to come before the remake trilogy in the canon, lead into it. I think it would be super cool if it cold opens just in Advent Children playing Cloud versus Sephiroth. Sephiroth loses, and then we follow him on a Balrog fall, like opening 2 towers into the live stream, and we see him initiate all of this, and then we see Cloud go through his whole grief arc in part 3 of this and end sort of in a better place than where Advent Children ended or whatever. That's my personal take on that.
I'm in the same boat.
I need that to happen now. I hope you're listening.
Please, Nomura.
Hamaguchi.
That was mostly
Yeah.
Major Trenton's idea from when I talked to Final Fantasy TV with him. And I was like,
Good,
shit.
good idea, Major Trenton.
Cold open, Balrog Fall sort of thing.
Yeah.
Playing as Sephiroth, of course.
Love it.